Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. The objectivist Pnyx is hereby assembling. Your humble reincarnation of Themistocles, Mr. Cropper, is present, and I will be considering a submission from the wise Archon Jim Woods. I'm having a little bit of fun with these historical terms, but they do serve to inform. Now, the Acropolis is shown there, and the Pnyx is shown here. You'll recall it was the gathering place, and when they gathered there, the first thing that was said was, "Who wishes to address the crowd," or whatever, the assembly? Who wishes to address the assembly? And you'll recall that there was equality among the members. And you can go watch my video on the objectivist Pnyx is hereby assembled. Okay, let us go then to the comment. Here it is. Jim Woods, thank you very much. He says, for more than 100, now this is about China and stuff, Jim is trying to prevent me from crashing on the rocks of objectivist schism, which is hard to do. It seems that it's very hard for objectivists to prevent themselves from crashing on the rocks of objectivist schism. But Jim is doing his best to try to prevent me from doing that, and so he's trying to get me into a reasonable framework on trade with China. Okay, so let's go from there. For more than 100 years, long before Chinese communists, it has been U.S. policy to become a Pacific power, including a robust trade relationship with China. During World War II, FDR elevated China on the stage of world politics, leading to its veto in the UN Security Council. He means its veto power. Nixon's opening to China was to split them away from the sphere of Soviet communism. That's true. That's something that, I haven't mentioned really. Nixon wasn't just being, a greedy bastard trying to open up cheap factories in China. There was certainly a certain amount of cynical trade opportunism, but it was also a political move to put a wedge between the Soviet Union and China. That much is true, I agree. Without defining what it precisely meant to us, we endorsed a one China policy. I don't know Jim, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by without defining what it precisely it meant to us. You mean that we continue to endorse both Taiwan and have relations now with China? I think that's what he is talking about there, but it's probably not material. Okay, it's not essential. So we endorsed a one China policy. Okay, in the 80s, the Democratic legislative attacks upon trade deficits with Japan and Taiwan. Now, this is what I'm worried about right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is where I'm worried. The nihilists, the modern nihilism, the modern insanity of view everything backwards, turn everything upside down. That's how it's brilliant, is view it backwards and upside down. This is nihilism, okay? So in the 1980s, the Democratic legislative attacks upon trade deficits with Japan and Taiwan and statutory import quotas targeting our allies caused our friends to redirect capital investment into China. So we began investing into China. It seems like, honestly, it seems a lot like the second law of thermodynamics to me. It seems like China was empty and was just, ripe for development. Hundreds of millions of peasants, and all you have to do is put up a factory, which is cheap as dirt to put up a factory in these poor countries. All you have to do is get a factory set up, and then you've got absolutely unlimited labor. So it looks like to me the second law of thermodynamics was just going to push these technologies into China. Now, if that's true, then there's a certain amount of determinism in history, and from Ray Kurzweil's graphs of the the decreasing price of metal over time and stuff like that. I don't know if there's determinism or not in history, but all right, so I'm a little bit off the subject. But okay, so the Democrats attack trade deficits. There's and statutory allies, redirect capital investment to China, thus making them a potential victim in a China meltdown. Right, China was unstable, right? It was communist. It's lawless. So we're starting to dump a bunch of money in there, and we're scared of what's going to happen there. In the 90s, Clinton began opening trade with China as a strategy to transform the mainland from its backward communist poverty. We did the free trade zones. Now, I thought that started in the 80s. But maybe the 90s is when it really got started. But I thought that it started in the 80s. But okay, it's not a big deal. I mean, it started with Nixon for sure. Okay, so Clinton began opening trade with China as a strategy to transform the mainland. Policies by the Nixon and Clinton administration have created a China substantially better than the days of the Great Leap. By better, do you mean stronger? What do you mean by better? More well equipped to fight us? All right, Trump's policy change now is telling China that it's time to take their training wheels off and that they are to accept adult responsibilities related to trade. I think that's a fair summation of Trump and his attitude now. So let me just sum up to here, if I may, Jim. You're saying that we have treated China with kitten gloves or kid gloves and helped them because they were utterly, utterly backwards. And now that sort of favored trade status has to be tampered down, or the training wheels have to come off, okay? That's what I take you to be saying there. I think that's an honest appraisal. It drops too much historical context to say, but Ayn Rand said don't help the commies because East minus West equals 0, which is a good book. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware, East minus West equals 0 is the book from which I get this essential thought, but I mean, minus all the evidence I have for it besides. I mean, the MiG fighter plane and so on. I mean, the East can never make anything. All right, so I'm dropping too much historical context when I say let's just not trade with the commies. I'm sort of with you here, Jim, because like I say, I'm not sure the second law of thermodynamics would allow us to keep China utterly undeveloped no matter what. So I'm sort of with you on this. I don't know if we should really be trading with them so much, and you know what? If they end up having a big frickin' war with us, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to say I was right, and that Peikoff was right, because I take from when Peikoff said no, China's not a new capitalist utopia. They just have let their slaves' chains out a little bit longer. There's been no essential change in China. So I take from Peikoff that. All right, so I'm dropping too much historical context. Well, let's let him make his case. China's a nuclear power with active territorial disputes and a long history of degenerating into bloody civil wars. Okay. I'm starting to wonder now why we want them to be wealthy. Several years ago, when the Tibetans were rioting, did you notice that those riots by Tibetans occurred outside Tibet within non-Tibetan China? No, I did not notice that, Jim. I really didn't. Jim says he did. He says I did, and I bet the Politburo did as well, the Chinese Politburo. So Tibetans were rioting outside of Tibet. Okay, so what he's saying is that it's kind of a boiling pot and the lid is maybe not so tightly on there. Okay, he mentions degenerating into bloody civil wars, and then he mentions the Tibetans rioting outside of Tibet. He noticed this, and so did the Chinese Politburo, and this comes on his degenerating into bloody civil wars comment. Okay, so I'm following him here. The surface trade dispute is really about a peaceful transformation to Chinese reunification that does not degenerate into a nuclear civil war with resulting technology proliferation issues. True, Jim, and I'm wondering whether arming them with the world's factories is the best way to go about this. I don't know if there's a great way to go about it at all. They have a hell of a lot of people over there, and that's just an issue that's just one of the facts on the ground in the world we live in. There's a large population in China, period, end of story. Now we have to deal with that fact. Should we give them all of the world's factories? You know, I mean, if we had laws 20 years ago that said American corporations are not allowed to purchase goods from slave factories, they have to be paying fair wages and they have to be OSHA program factories, then we would have legally been required to purchase our goods from places like India that could set up a reasonable facsimile of OSHA or something like that. Or certainly we would buy our stuff from Taiwan or Australia or Canada or at least Mexico, right? And certainly China would have been able to sell its stuff, but it wouldn't have been able to sell its stuff to America, and America wouldn't have bought its stuff and wouldn't have helped enrich them. So, anyways, that's my thinking on that. Let's go forward. I'm just not sure, Jim, that you're making the case. Now, Jim, let me just ask you here. Have you read Isabel Patterson's God of the Machine? It would shock me if you haven't. But if you haven't, that might be the next thing on your reading list, I have to say honestly. Okay. Let the Chi-Coms burn. I'm not saying we should necessarily do total embargo and not let them trade at all, but I do think that it's pretty morally dirty of us to allow us to trade with slave owners here in America. I think the government should say you cannot purchase slave-made goods. That is not included in individual rights. And just hold American corporations up to that. Yeah, it would make things more expensive in America, but at least we wouldn't be shipping our money to China. So let the Chi-Coms burn? I don't know. Don't twist my arm or I'll agree with you on that. Let's see what he has to say about that. Hong Kong, Taiwan. All right, we can save those. And Japan may go down with them. Okay. That worries me very, very badly. Hong Kong might be gone already. Taiwan might be a foregone conclusion. And Japan might go just because of the population decline. So, Jim, I'm not sure that those are a very good set of prizes. I just don't know. Let the Chi-Coms burn, and those things might go. And I'll tell you what, Jim, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan might have been enough to hold China back if we wouldn't have developed it with such gusto, if we would have allowed it to stay backwards until they developed their society and their culture and decided to embrace the law. But instead, we've built them a bunch of factories, and they still don't have laws. They're still run by a bunch of gangs. So it might be true, Jim, that we're going to lose Hong Kong and Taiwan and Japan in the deal. We've neutered Japan; they can't even defend themselves. We've reduced them to a neutered society since 1950. But anyways, not getting off on that, we might lose all three of those. The Chi-Coms might burn the whole situation down because we have armed them. That's what I'm really worried about here. We and our allies are in deep. Yes, I think we've put ourselves in deeper by building China. North and South Korean talks under Trump may become a pattern for improvement in China-Taiwan relations that doesn't lead to civil war, but peaceful transformation. and I hope a multi-party China with elections instead of battles. In my opinion, there are battles going on in China right now, and of course, they aren't battles in the street, but I'll bet there are lives being lost and people going to jail, and and maybe it's not at a fever pitch like in 1937 in Russia, but I'll bet that. I mean, let's just all admit that the Politburo has to arrest people all the time. They do. People disappear constantly. It's a churning, broiling mass of a battle right now. They're in a state of civil war. It's a slow civil war. All right, so the above isn't Euron's policy or objectivism's policy, but I've tried to communicate the ideas that are actually driving American policy across administrations. And I think you've done a fair job of that, Jim. I think that we are in a rough position. I think that, like I said, the second law of thermodynamics might just be so stacked against us that we had to open factories in China. It was just too obvious to everybody, including the Chinese. They looked around the world and said, we are by far the poorest, so, excuse me. So the question to you, Mr. Cropper, are you for letting China and our allies burn, or are you for a peaceful Chinese evolution through American diplomatic and economic power? That I am for. But I think we might have slipped up, Jim. I think that we should have been buying more of our stuff from peaceful allies. And we should have allowed China to buy stuff from us and develop and sell stuff to whoever they want to in the world. But we should not have allowed American corporations to purchase slave labor-produced products. By doing that, we have enriched China much more quickly than they should have been enriched, and possibly beyond the level to which they should have been enriched. So, I agree with you on a great deal of what you said here. I think that we are in a hell of a mess. I don't necessarily know if it's better to undo all of it. I'll tell you what, if you wanted to go in and build 100 skyscrapers and a brand new set of freeways and 3 coal-fired power plants in North Korea, I would say you're frickin' insane. Why do you want to go build a bunch of power plants and freeways and skyscrapers for North Korea? So now I put the question to you, Jim. Why do we want to do that for China? Should not we protect individual rights and not allow corporations inside of America to purchase things that are produced by slave labor for the purpose of protecting individual rights, and thereby enrich our allies, our true allies, the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Australians, India, Taiwan, Singapore? Should we not purchase things from them instead of China and let China develop as it sees fit? So that's where I stand now. So the objectivist Pnyx has assembled. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. If you enjoy what I do and the work I'm doing, you think it's important, you want me to do more of it, please patronize me. Click the link at this bottom of this video, and let me know by giving me $5 or $10 a month or whatever. Help me build up a little stream so that I can spend time doing this stuff and not feel guilty about it. Thank you. Mr. Cropper out.